Hello everyone and welcome all in. It's a new show this week. Each and every Monday I'll be joining Neil Channing, a professional gambler, on our new show, the Betting Weekly Dojo. Now, like me, you've probably been asked, first question, what's a dojo? Well, it's a place for learning in judo and martial arts, and no better person to teach us the rules in sports betting is the legendary better, Mr. Neil Channing, or known to his friends as Sensei Channing, another influence. Now, so what do I do? Do I have to bow like this? Is that what do we do in a dojo? Do we do anything like this? What do we do?
I was excited then for a second when you said I'm going to introduce and you'd mentioned the dojo. I thought Hong Kong Phooey was coming on. I was very excited.
No, Hong Kong Phooey never did anything. He was the part of the duo that everyone expected to do everything, solve all the crimes. It was the janitor.
He's a bit like me.
He's
a bit like me in that way. I kind of feel like I don't really know anything about gambling. I know lots of people that know things, and I pick bits of information off of different people. So I'm very Hong Kong Phooey, actually. I don't live in the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet.
Not anymore, but well, you move houses more times than anyone I know. Another new home today, a new place today.
I know. This one's quite temporary, actually. So maybe next time you see me, I'll be in a more palatial.
Just go on, if you're new to this show, well, everyone's new to this show, it's a new show, but if you're new to following the Betting Weekly show, studios here, Neil is an old friend of mine. He did do a Q&A answering session to introduce himself, to get, a lot of people who watched that. It was supposed to be a brief 1 minute. John, the producer, rang me back and said the first question lasted over a minute, so we had to, we didn't get the watered down version. But you said in it, Neil, that we've known each other for 25 years. In fact, we worked together for the first time 26 years ago.
Can you remember that? Because I can't. Now I've got to an age where I can only remember things that happened in the last 2 weeks. But and generally, it's the things that happened 3 years ago. I can't remember. I don't actually remember the first time I met you, although I feel like I should do, because you're a fairly striking individual and somebody that it's hard to sort of bump into Nigel and not know that you've met him. Can you remember the first time we met?
I remember walking into an office in Grosvenor Gardens near on the Buckingham Palace Road, and I came there in 1998.
Okay, so we were working for a betting company then. Yeah. And
I don't think you were working. I think you were working for a rival betting company.
I think you're right. I think I started at that company in '99. I think the other company saw through me. After 5 years, they finally figured me out and got rid of me. And I came to that other company, and what I remember mostly about that, I worked there for 5 years, was that my focus was purely on betting on horses, really, and I wasn't very focused on doing much for the company.
No, but it wasn't just betting on horses. You were an expert on American football, American sport. At the time, not many people used to really bet on American sports, but you had a passion for American football then.
Yeah, that was a funny one, really, because my sister, I remember she had a boyfriend, I can't even remember what he was called now, as a teenager, and he was really into American football, and they started showing it on Channel 4, which in those days was a new channel. We got a fourth TV channel in the 80s in the UK. And it was very exciting, and they wanted to try and be different to the other channels, so they said, well, we'll show a sport that no one else has ever shown in the UK, and they started showing the NFL, and I think the Miami Dolphins won the Super Bowl that year, and for that reason they're the most supported NFL team in the UK.
Well, I've never been to it. I've been to one American football game. I do remember though doing the night shifts with you when the American football was on, and we didn't really answer many phones. The out calls were much more than the in calls. There was more outgoing calls on our wagering, and I do remember a few bad bets on American shirt numbers. I seem to remember American shirt numbers used to be the most painful the bet, and I used to get the inevitable call from the companies we used to trade with on the Monday, ask for our balances on American football shirt numbers. I do remember that. That was so. What it was, it used to add up the number of the shirt numbers that the players scored in the touchdown. And I knew nothing about American football. And in those days, the English soccer used to play way of number 1 to 11. And when you see these guys coming on with like 97, 76...
The wide receivers were always in the 80s. Although it's changed now. A lot of times they're in the teens now.
Well, I wish I was going under now, because them they were bad, really, really heavy, swingy kind of bets that we were having there on the American football. And it's the only time I really sort of started watching American football, when I was doing those late shifts with you and getting into it and watching it.
I don't know. Surely I got you that year. There was one year. I don't want to brag, but there was one year that was a particularly good year for me. I suddenly spotted quite early in the season. I think they lost their first 2 games and won the third. I'm sure someone will be Googling that now. The Rams, who are now I don't know, they've changed a million times. We'll just call them the Rams. And they had this bloke, Kurt Warner, came to be their quarterback. And they scored a load of points in the third game of the season. And I just thought, you know what, if you're going to win the Super Bowl, it's all about offense these days. You need to score a load of points. And I thought, well, I'll just have a little bet on them to win the Super Bowl. I think they were 80-1. And then they won again the next week, 66-1. I went in again. They won again the next week, 40. I went in every week. And then on the day of the Super Bowl, they were 7-point favourites. And one UK firm made them minus 225, which doesn't tally up well with a 7-point favourite. 7-point favourite should be minus 300. So I went in again. Nothing wrong with that. And no hedges. Hedges are for gardens, basically.
Yes, well done.
But
Perfect.
Got that one in early, Nigel, for you. That was for you. But yeah, that was. I'm surprised you don't remember that season. All you remember is me losing you money on shirt.
I think what it is, we're going to come on to a little bit of a strategy on people who bet on futures, but I think what it was for me when I was a young guy, I was in a relationship quite young. And not many people were in relationships then. You're all sort of single guys betting and going.
We were all just kind of nerdy freaks.
Yeah, and I was in a relationship young. I was going to be a father, and I didn't really like gambling. I wanted everything for the moment. So whenever there was an anti-post bet where someone would say, or a future bet, we're going to bet this one, we'd tie our money up for such a long period of time. It didn't interest me. I wanted the money there and then. So I would play these big swingy markets, but it backfired me, and the ones went.
I think that's quite interesting, actually, though, because I don't think people think about that enough. You know, we've got the first week of the football season. Well, we had the first week of the soccer this weekend, but next weekend we'll have the first week with the Premier League starting. And a lot of people think about, I've got to have a futures bet. I'm going to bet, some mid-table team to finish ahead of another mid-table team, and I'm going to get 10-11 my money minus $1.10. And I'm going to have an interest every week watching those two teams progress against each other. But of course, the downside of that, however good a bet you had, is that you tied up your money the whole season, and you're not going to be able to reinvest. If you have a 10-11, $1.10 favourite this week and they win, you can reinvest that money. And if you're good at betting and you find 5 good $1.10 favourites in the next 5 weeks, you get a sort of compounding thing where you get to reinvest the winnings. And I don't think people think about that enough. Also, we lived last year, we had a high inflation. People that bet Man City to win the league tied up their money for the whole year. They, to an extent, if you're having to pay on, if you're betting heavy odds on something, it's a terrible idea in a world of high inflation. I mean, obviously inflation's come down a little bit now, but I think that that's a kind of interesting thing. I think UK punters are a little bit more into doing long-term bets. I think the US punters like to turn their money over quicker, and they like to bet on the thing that's happening today. It makes me sick when I see at the start of the NFL season a lot of supposedly clever people on Twitter talking about season totals. I mean, these are just rubbish bets, really, on how many wins each team will get in the NFL. You're having to tie your money up for the whole year to try and win a bet that's minus $1.10, minus $1.20, minus $1.30. It's not like you're getting 10-1 about something. You've got to have a chunk on to make it change your life, and you've got to sit there for the whole year sweating it. Yeah, sure, occasionally the books make the odd mistake. It's not even a market that's covered by every bookmaker around the world. A lot of times it's Vegas casinos. I think it's like an ego thing for people on Twitter to say how clever they are that they got the first line on it before it changed.
I think the other thing here as well is that future bets now, I know it's not the same with not the same stateside, but you're tying up your money with a lot of bookmakers, and there's a lot of possibility some of these bookmakers might not be here at the end of the season, which is another concern as well. I mean, even I've got older, I do think there's some tremendous value on the futures in the soccer season this year. I know we've got some soccer, but the idea of tying that money up for a long period of time is something that I still loathe to do, because I still think I'd be better off with the money that I have and be making more percentage and more winners regularly on a week or a month than I would do by just tying up the same amount of money to the end of the season. So, for example, this season I've seen a bet which I really like. It's Manchester City, without Manchester City in the Premier League, Arsenal minus 125. Now, I think that should be minus $3, but I don't, what I want to have a decent bet on it, but at the same time I don't want to use my bankroll up on that and sat there for almost a year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and we live in a world now where having credit with a bookmaker is a kind of a thing of the past, isn't it? I mean, I think in the States, if you're getting credit with a bookmaker, it means you're dealing in the black market, basically. I mean, in the UK, credit with bookmakers ended kind of 20 years ago, really. So, 25 years ago, probably. I very much with you on that. I think the futures are great if you're picking somebody at a more of a long shot price. I think that's a good thing to do, and you get to play in like down the leagues in the more obscure divisions, the lower leagues. I think that's quite interesting, but it's not really for me. I don't spend any time looking at those kind of things.
Let's look back on last week. We might as well stay with soccer and football. Last week was the first week of the EFL Championship. We saw on your interview the Q&A. Quick fire, well, yours was a long fire Q&A. You're quite heavy on Birmingham to win the win League One this season. Last week, all three of the anti-post favourites in the English soccer lower leagues, so Leeds in the Championship, Birmingham in League One, and the MK Dons in League Two, all three of those teams failed to win, which must have been a fantastic weekend for the books, for Bet Rivers in particular. When you're betting an anti-post bet, and you like Birmingham, obviously it takes a bit of time. This is a strategy that comes down not only into soccer but also in Super Bowl betting as well. When is it that you think, well, they're too good that the market, they might lose their three matches, but the opening three matches, but they're too good, going to change? Are you someone who keeps pressing when the value gets bigger, or do you just say, okay, I'm happy with my trend, it will get better? How do you approach that kind of thing? So you're now involved in Birmingham, I'm guessing around 2-1. They've gone out to plus 225 with some bookies with a home draw. Would you go in again, or would you sort of sit there for a few weeks? When do you sort of realise you're at a good bet, or do you think, hang on a minute, I might have got this wrong?
I mean, just from a time point of view, I probably won't invest that much time in the Birmingham thing. I've had a reasonable bet on. I'm pretty happy with that. I also actually got 10-1 that they would get more than 100 points this year, which I thought was quite fair. I think I can't remember what it was now. Was it 6 out of the last 15 or something that have won Division 1 have got more than 100 points? So I just thought that sounded like quite a big price. But I did have a quick look, and I thought, well, they've lost the first game. Maybe I'll get plus 350 now. And it didn't. It wasn't as big as I thought it might be. So I'm probably okay. I don't really need to have any more on. I think. Did I say 350? I meant to say 250.
Yep.
I think they. I'll have a quick look the first few weeks, but basically, I think I'm kind of done with it. I had what I wanted on. I'm not gonna. It's not like a massive thing. I just, on a glance through, they look like one of the better bets. It's ironic, really, because they got beat by Reading. I was born in Reading, and they were like my team as a kid. And I think Reading were a bit unlucky, actually. I think didn't Birmingham get a dodgy penalty or something?
Yeah, it was a draw, wasn't it? 1-1. So I mean, listen. These teams take time to gel, and that's the thing is, people look around this. And the first weeks of the season is always a very, very shrewd football better. Do you remember Joe Fagan?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
very
Scottish
shrewd
guy.
Yeah, he said that he'd never have a bet on the football until November, which was which is probably right, really. The strategy, very hard to do that when you run a tipping YouTube channel. Very hard to say, listen, we're not going to do anything. But the strategy is the same. When it gets to these kind of things like the start of the NFL, it takes a bit of time for players to gel. New people come in, especially in like these English lower leagues. I don't think many people will realise that there was a couple of teams at the weekend. They've had 9 new players out of the 11 starting players. 9 of them were fresh players. So the form guide doesn't really come in till 6 weeks or till sort of November time. Then you really know where you are. But the form monies, and it was a bad weekend for favourite bettors. I got let down by Chesterfield on Friday. It was a bad week. How's your week been? Obviously, the Olympic Games just come to a conclusion over in Paris. I know you're into all your sports. And as you said at the top of the show, a lot of people that mark your card, you lose a lot of people to have good people around you. And I'm sure you would be having some very, very... I reckon you're the kind of guy who could pick up a telephone and reach out to a pole vaulting expert or a hammer expert or a break dancing expert, something like that. How did it go over the Olympics?
Well, I did. I mean, actually, funnily enough, I turned on the telly yesterday. I hadn't had a bet at all in the weightlifting, and your old mucker Rory Giuani was on the BBC.
Yeah.
I mean, how have we not got the inside track on the weightlifting?
What, if you'd watched the tennis show, with Rory's tennis show before the Olympics, he gave one bet, and he said, I'm going to give you one bet for the Olympics, and it was France to win the handball, and they won it at 9-1.
Yeah, he did. Actually, I did see Rory had a few good bets. I think he bet Lyles to win the 100 metres. And the woman, I think he had a, what was his other one that I did? He had a couple. He had the woman to win the 100 metres as well, Julian Alfred. I think she was about 6-1. Yeah, I think Rory's pretty sharp now. I had a guy who I haven't spoken to very much at all, really.
For 4 years.
And he suddenly,
I won't speak to you again for 4 years.
That was 3 years ago.
Oh,
3 years ago in Tokyo.
Yeah.
Suddenly, out of the blue, this guy wrote to me from New Zealand.
Do people write to you? People write,
yeah, it was an email.
It
was an email. It wasn't like parchment and quill or something like that. Anyway,
you haven't spoken to a long time. I don't know if you have your email address.
He sent me an email and he said, "Oh, hello. I haven't spoken. I used to talk to him sometimes about tennis actually, and he's quite into cycling. Anyway, he sent me a thing saying that he was doing some work on the Olympics. He does a bit of freelance journalism, I think, and he knew a bit about the way the rowing had been going, and we should back New Zealand to win the four. So." 4 people in a boat rowing, basically. And the GB team were like, I think they were 4-6. And second favourites were the States. They were kind of 5-2. And in places you could get 10-1 New Zealand, although they were generally kind of 6 and 7-1. So he said, well, they've been training really well, and we really, think that it's going to be very close. And there was only 2 heats. The Americans were hot favourites with the Australians second favourites in their heat. And New Zealand were up against GB in the other heat. So, GB were 8-13 to win the whole thing. You'd think they'd be quite a short price to win the heat. And I think it was like the top 2 went into the final from each heat. And then there was a kind of repechage for some other people to be in the final. Anyway, New Zealand won. They won the heat. It was amazing. And I was like, oh, well, this is good. They're probably favourites to win the final now. They've bashed up the anti-post favourite in the heat. I don't know. I don't know anything about rowing. But if you'd have seen that, you bet somebody at 8-1. They beat the 8-13 favourite easily in the heat. Would you make them favourite to win the final?
I think you have to.
Well, I sort of thought, probably they'll be like 5-4, 6-5, something like that. And America won their heat really easily as well, so they're probably going to shorten up. They were about 3-1. I thought maybe they'll be like 2-1 now. And I thought GB, well, they have to drift, don't they? They were 8-13. They got chinned in the heat. I don't know, maybe it's a pretty wide open heat between the 3 of them now, really. Anyway, the new prices came up. GB are even money. New Zealand, somebody put up 5-1, and America were about 9-4. So I messaged him back. I said, well, I don't understand this. I think if you've just beaten somebody in the heat, aren't you just going to beat them again? And, it's not like they were like cruising and not trying, GB, because you got a better lane in the final if you won your heat. And anyway, he said, no, you're absolutely right. If you've beaten somebody once, you should definitely beat them again. So I laid GB. I put up some lay bets and played bookmaker, and I got against them. I put up 11.08 against. Got filled in, and then I bet New Zealand again at 5-1, 4-1, 7-2. Ended up being a massive swing for me. I was only pottering about with this thing to start with. Suddenly, I've got one of my biggest bets of the month is on the rowing. I couldn't name one of the people in it. Anyway, the final starts. GB absolutely make a Horlicks of the start, completely mess it up. And it's between New Zealand and America. America won in a close finish. Killed me, it did. Absolutely killed me. I mean, maybe in that situation there is room for hedges. Maybe the obvious thing was the only danger was really America. But there you go. So how's my Olympics gone? It all went wrong in the men's 4 rowing. But I did feel like I had an edge in it. I don't know. Do you think, though, with the Olympics, just I don't. You probably want to move on and talk about something else. But I did really enjoy the Olympics, but also I do enjoy sports more when I bet on them. I enjoyed watching things like climbing and BMX and stuff, which I didn't bet on.
You enjoyed watching the climbing, really?
I loved the climbing. I thought it was
the one
brilliant.
that went up to 5 seconds and bashed
No, not the speed one. The other one, the boulder, was really good. I was really good. I really enjoyed that. I really liked the triathlon. I enjoyed that a lot.
That would have been a good in-running betting heat.
Yeah, well, we should have been. I mean, people should have known that we were, going to win the triathlon, because our people have had much more experience of swimming in rivers that sewage has been poured into. So, we should have been one of the favourites for that.
Yeah.
But no, what I find interesting is that the kind of sports that people like betting on at the Olympics, like the 100 metres, is a really big betting event. Loads of liquidity, loads of bookmakers betting on it. But some of the other sports, like say volleyball or handball or something like that, they're popular in Eastern Europe, but they're not particularly popular in the UK, which is a much bigger betting country. So the liquidity on them is quite low. It's kind of weird though, really, because American people like betting on basketball. It's a high scoring game where you can have a handicap and you can have minus $1.10 each of two, and it makes for a good, high volume, high turnover sport. Well, volleyball, handball, water polo, a lot of those sports are exactly the same. And I would have thought that they would have been the biggest betting sports of the Olympics, but they weren't really. Why do you think that is?
I think a lot of the bookmakers are running scared of them. I think if they don't want to take them, they don't have the expertise, they're reliant on somebody else. And I think they're a little bit running scared of them. Yeah, obviously the 100 metres that odds compilers would know all about the athletes who have all the form for the year, and it's televised. I think some of the other sports you struggle. And it was even worse years ago. There's a brilliant story that John Wright, one of the guys who works on this show, is a cricket guy. He was the head of training for Corals back in like the early 90s. And in those days, the only way you could price up the athletics was by buying Athletics Weekly. And in the Athletics Weekly, we give you the best runs of the year. So if it's the World Championship or the Olympic Games, they'd look at the 10,000 metres and they'd see all the best times over the years, and then they would form their prices. And they did I can't remember the event. It may have been the women's 10,000 or it may have been the marathon or something like that. But they get their prices in the shops, and someone walks in the shop and asks for a competitor that isn't on the list. So he's looking through the list, and they have to call up to the headquarters and say, "Listen, I've got someone in the shops who wants to bet this particular lady to win the 10,000 metres." And they said, "I'll quote her 50-1." Couldn't find her in the fastest running of the year. Anyway, the person's very happy with 50-1, and that's $50 on it or $100 on it at 50-1. They cut her to 25-1. Next minute, somebody else comes in a different shop, same person, 25-1, wants $50 on it. They think, "Hang on a minute, what's going on here?" Cut her again to 10-1. Same thing happens. They take the prices down and they ask someone, "Listen," someone's asking,
I know where this is going.
It was the woman who was the 1-3 favourite had got married. She ran in her new name rather than her maiden name. And it's brilliant.
I think there used to be a team of Scandinavian people that were like super expert on athletics. I remember there was a whole bunch of those kind of stories. But even now with the internet, I don't know whether you noticed, just from a betting point of view, the men's 400, they came out, when they come out and they sort of stand in a kind of funny pose, and then they walk onto the track. The second favourite was 4-1. He just didn't come out, and they went, "Oh, apparently he's injured. He's not coming out. He's not going to run." And the same thing happened in the women's 200. There was a woman who was like, I think she was 2-1 or 5-2, and literally just didn't come out and do her little pose. And they went, "Oh yeah, she's injured. She's not running." The betting markets didn't seem to really know until the second it happened, which you'd think in this day of the internet and modern information, that would be almost impossible to happen.
Man, at least the only thing for me is a saving grace. It comes around every 4 years. I'm not really an Olympian. I don't really like Olympians. And to sum up my Olympics, I had one decent bet, and that was the only bet I had. I have a friend of mine who is an athletics correspondent for one of the biggest newspapers over here, and he travels around. He rang me. He told me about 3 or 4 weeks ago. He said, "There's a guy who's just beaten." What was the guy who won the 100 metres? Lyles, wasn't it? Lyles. He's just beaten Lyles. He said he's got a chance. He said he's Jamaican. He's a young fella. He's 33-1. He's called Seville. So I rang around trying to get a bet on. Looked at the internet, couldn't get a bet on. I found one particular firm who I could get on. I think I got 20 quid on the guy at 25-1. So I had 25-1 for this fella. Anyway, he gets to the semi-finals. I bet him each way. He's in the semi-finals, and he beats Niles in the semi-final. Beats him easy, like your rowing story. Beats him easy. He was 12-1 before them to win the gold. Now going into the gold, he's +2. Going into the final, he's 225, +225 to win it, and he's -700 to win a gold medal. And in the final, he comes last. Now don't hedge. That's why hedging isn't for gardening. That's why you should always hedge, kids. Don't worry about always hedge. The Olympics, I'm not a fan. I think that honestly, the Olympics to me is not a sport that interests me absolutely. I'm not a tournament or competition that interests me whatsoever.
A few more sports. Get some more sports in it. Baseball,
darts.
cricket.
Get some darts in
darts,
it. Darts.
Pool.
Pool. Yeah. I'm not an Olympian.
Frisbee as well.
Yeah, everything like that. I like all that, but
make it last 3 weeks instead of 2 weeks. Less medals for swimming. How can one guy win 7 medals in swimming, all different
unbelievable
distances?
Well, it's not fair, is it? It's not fair. But the highlight of the whole Olympics, though, without a doubt, and it is my favourite highlight of the week, and probably my highlight of the month so far, is the Australian breakdancing. The video, it gets me every time. You know, when I watched that, that's got to be. Has it come out that he must be a comedian or something who's gone into?
It's a bit mean. I think that's a bit mean. I enjoy all those new sports. I really like. I really enjoyed the BMX. Loved it, actually. Fabulous.
Well, that was another one. Did you see the British girl was the favourite for it? She was winning each heat easy. Got to the final. She was a right carve up. They all come across her. She got boxed in. She had no chance.
She's tremendous. I thought her attitude was brilliant when she lost. Anyway, there you go. I could talk about the Olympics for weeks. But
let's move on to golf. And last night I saw one of the most craziest things I've ever seen in the world of golf. And I thought to myself, I cannot believe what's happened here. Kuchar going down the last on the 18th at the Wyndham Classic. Takes his shot, says it's too dark. Going to come back today, not going to play. Tournament's over. Rise won it. He's got to come back and play one hole. That was petulance at its best. The first thing I thought of was that what's going to happen here for the betting purposes, for 2 balls, for tournaments. If I didn't know he was going to come back to play the hole, but he's coming back. But I couldn't believe.
It's just nonsense. Well, first of all, Matt Kuchar was 90-1 to win this tournament, so it was a big price really. He was 3 ahead at one stage, and he's going to finish unplaced. So for punters that backed him, it's a bit of a sickener. If he makes a birdie on the 18th hole, he gets 223,000 in prize money. If he makes a par, 134,000, and if he makes a bogey, 77,000. So I guess he could argue it's pretty important for him. For an average guy, that's a year's money. The difference between one shot on that hole. But of course, these people are multi-millionaires. His playing partner finished the hole. He didn't think it was too dark. I think the previous shot, Kuchar had taken his shot when the people were on the fairway and he nearly hit somebody. So he said, "No, I'm not going to come back." And I think according to the letter of the law, he's right. But apparently it costs $100,000 to reopen the course today. They have to get the greenkeepers out working, the security, all the staff and everything like that. And they're just doing it for Kuchar. I think
he's got to pay, surely. He's got to pay for that, hasn't he? Well,
Well,
you pay
it
for
just
that.
seems. I mean, it just seems ridiculous. The first tee-off time this morning was 6:31. I think that's when the course opens. They should have told him to come back at that time. I think they let him have a bit too much of a lie-in. But with Kuchar, when people cheer, they always cheer Kuch,
Yeah.
and sometimes it sounds a bit like they're booing him. I think from now on, if you're following Kuchar, you can boo, and it won't be an unacceptable thing because it will be covered up by the Kuch.
I mean, it was
to this man.
Well,
He's got a bit of form, hasn't he? He was quite rude to his caddy a couple of years ago in a thing, and it went viral. I mean, I don't think he's the nicest person in the world.
Boo. He's not our favourite. I mean, country grade. He should be paid to pay. Come back and pay the whole, but we take 50% of your profit, whatever you make. Set a stand. Kuchar is not our favourite here on the Wedding Weekly Dojo, not for us. Let's move on to a final subject. I know it's a subject that's very, very close to your heart, Channings, and if you look at follow Neil on Twitter, you'll see that Neil is a lot involved over here in political betting. He does a very, very successful podcast, which is the number one political betting podcast throughout the summer. It's only just launched it, but it's been doing really.
I don't think there are that many political betting.
Well, yeah,
podcasts.
But he was doing very well on it.
We went on Apple Podcasts. We decided to put ourselves in the government section, and it turns out it's quite easy to be number one in the government section.
Well, I didn't know. I couldn't say you were the betting political podcast, so I don't think that's factually true. Betting, but the point is, it's a very, very good podcast. It's highly about betting. If you want to bet on politics, Neil is the man to do it.
Can I name it? Am I allowed to?
Of course you can.
Bet the House. It's called. So.
Bet the House. Yes. Make sure you download that on Apple. And obviously, we've just come through a general election now, and our Prime Minister is not having a very good start to his tenure in charge. And obviously, the American public has got all that to look forward to, or not look forward to, over the next few months. Obviously, stateside, not allowed to gamble on the politics, which is
I saw that recently. Elizabeth Warren tried to come out last week and say that it should be totally banned by law in America, betting on politics. I hope that doesn't happen.
Is there places you can bet on politics?
I think you can bet. I think you can bet offshore,
Right.
and there are sort of Bitcoin sites and stuff where you can do things. I think there's a good chance that betting on politics becomes totally legal at some stage in the States. I think there's a feeling that it can interfere with the democratic process, which, given how much money there is in US politics and how relatively small political betting markets are, that just seems a bit nonsense to me. I mean, obviously the betting on the president is a huge, huge thing. For Betfair, the biggest betting exchange in the UK, the two biggest events they've ever covered are the 2020 and the 2016 American elections. And on the current election, on the 2024 election, I'm just going to quickly check to give you the right number. They've currently matched 48 million on who will be the next president. And the day that Donald Trump damaged his ear, he became 4-7 favourite. So he was 1.57 on exchanges to be the next president, or minus 175. Obviously at that stage it was Joe Biden. Kamala Harris was trading to be the next president. At that stage she was a 16-1 chance, so a bit of a long shot. And then of course, events transpired. The Democrats switched to Kamala Harris. At the stage that Kamala Harris came in, Trump remained, actually. It was kind of weird because everybody knew that if Kamala Harris came in, she was going to be a lot more popular than Joe Biden. And polling showed that she had a better chance of beating Donald Trump. But her price was kind of similar. I mean, obviously in the first few days, they weren't sure for certain that she was going to be the candidate. It was possible that they had, more of a primary and that other candidates might be involved. But anyway, there's been a huge move for her. The momentum is all with her, basically. She's gone from plus 175. She's now, she went favourite the other day. That's what happened last week. I think it was Thursday. She finally went favourite, and then actually the day before yesterday there was another kind of huge move because it had kind of been even money Kamala Harris, and plus $1.10 Donald Trump. He suddenly went to plus 120, and she went to sort of close to, she went to minus 105 basically. And I did speak to someone about that because it didn't feel like there was any big polling or anything. And they said one of the very largest players on Betfair has got really involved with backing Harris. And I'm sure if we tried to guess who that person was, we would get the name quite quickly. But there seems to have been a large injection of money into betting on Harris recently. And of course, the other thing that happened was she nominated her vice president candidate. And that was a tremendous betting race, fabulous betting in that. Josh Shapiro, about 3 weeks ago, was the 2-1 favourite. His odds fluctuated a fair bit. There seemed to be sort of two markets. Overnight, when I woke up in the UK, you'd find that people had bet him heavily. And then all through the daytime in the UK, he would drift out again. And then I'd go to sleep again and I'd wake up and he'd shorten right up. It felt like people stateside wanted to back him and people worldwide were against him. I don't know whether that was what was happening, but it did feel like that. And then finally she picked this guy, Volz, who's an interesting candidate. He traded he was like an 800-1 outsider at one stage to be the vice president candidate. Huge price. But as usual, the market knew. About an hour before the announcement was made, he suddenly went from 6-4 into 1-4. Huge money on him right near the end, and I think he was matched at 1-20. And then suddenly she announced him. So must have been some insider betting going on there. But it's been a hugely interesting betting markets going on. I feel like personally, if I had to guess where the market's going to move in the next week or so, I think the momentum for Harris is going to continue. And I think Trump's going to drift over the next couple of weeks. If I was coming into it new and I hadn't had a bet at this stage, I think if you bet Harris, you'll be able to get out for a profit within a couple of weeks.
There's a big interview tonight, isn't there? Elon Musk has got a chat with Donald Trump. Do you think that's going to sort of influence the market there?
I'm sure it will. And obviously the market's very heavily dominated by recency bias. Anything that, if you get a new poll out, immediately reflected in the market, if Trump is seen to perform well. But, I he could shorten. But I do think it's a bit of a... It's a bit of a poison chalice, this interview, isn't it? I think it's a thing that can only really go wrong for him. I don't necessarily think it'll be a huge influence on the way the election goes. I'm purely just thinking in terms of how the market moves in the next 48 hours. And I think, he has the potential to embarrass himself rather than to impress the market. And I think it could lead to a drift on Trump in the short term. I'm trading it like a stock thing, really. I'm not really thinking in terms of who's going to be president. I'm just constantly thinking, where do I see the price in the next, 3 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours? And for the last 2 weeks, I just think the price of Trump is getting longer and the price of Harris is getting shorter. And I don't really have a dog in the fight. I don't... I'm not massively in love with either candidate particularly. So I try to be very politically dispassionate when I'm betting on politics. I think you have to be. I think, I like to bet, on things that I don't necessarily believe in from a political point of view. I think if you're having too many bets on the way you vote, you're probably not doing it right.
Yep, like a day trading. The market's moving all the time. Things are happening all the time on the betting markets on the American election. We'll probably have that covered as well over the next month or so here on the Betting Weekly Dojo. We're back every Monday looking at the world of betting. So we've covered up the Olympics. Neil is a big Olympian. I'm not Olympian. I want darts.
Going for gold.
going for gold there. Neil, we almost chopped it off on our anti-post bets on the Olympics, but got the value and done our money. That's pretty much the story of mine.
Got done by the Americans.
That's another Neil getting done by the Americans in the rowing. I got done by the other American as well. Yes, I got done by the American as well. Americans win gold as well. We look back at the Premier League. Looking ahead to the Premier League this week. The Premier League starts on Friday night, and there's lots of content coming your way here on the Betting Weekly Studios. Betting Weekly Premier League returns on Thursday. Myself, Jack, and Dan Roebuck. We have a new show, Betting Weekly Live, every day, Monday to Friday at 11 o'clock Eastern Time, looking at the best sporting action for that day with a couple of our handicappers here at Because We Win. Make sure you head across to BetRivers website. All the events we're talking about here, the sporting events will be covered there. The NFL coming up soon, talking about anti-post markets on there. The Premier League, the EFL as well. Lots of action going ahead. And we'll be back on next Monday looking at the Betting Weekly Dojo, the world, a place for learning. A place, hopefully you've learned a little bit today. Don't bet on people who change their names when they get married, and don't bet on any advice from Neil's rowing friend who contacts him every 4 years. Have a great day, have a great week, Neil. Take care, and cooch.